Enquiry, with the first 2 days having sat on the 5th and 6th of December in 2023. The appeal is made by Fast Flow Mastics Limited against the decision of South Hams District Council. The development proposed as part of the appeal is a hybrid planning application for a mixed-use development comprising an outline application with detailed access for up to 80 residential units, circa 1,100 square metres of commercial space, demolition of existing structures except for the Brunel building and chimney, provision of open space and surface water attenuation, parking and associated infrastructure. The full permission element of that hybrid planning application comprises the change of use of the Brunel building, and the entire site is known as the former Dairy Crest site in Totnes. For anyone new here today, my name is Holly Nichols and I am the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to conduct this inquiry and to make the decision on the appeal. As I've already said, we've had 2 sitting days already. This is the third. The suggested running order for today and for the following 2 days is available in some issued paper agendas on the table there, but that was already made available online for anyone that's been looking at the inquiry website. Firstly, the usual housekeeping reminders. I trust that everybody knows where the fire exit is and the facilities. If there's any issue with that, please let me know now. Can everybody please turn off mobile phones and any other sort of email notification pings and pongs that might otherwise disrupt us, please? And then there is also the procedure around using microphones, which is necessary, which also links with the video live streaming. So this event is being live streamed again, and it is intended that the video that is taken will be made available on the council's YouTube website or the YouTube account. So if there is a problem with that, please can you let a council member of staff know at the earliest opportunity. The event is being live streamed via a Facebook feed as well, so just so you are all aware. So in terms of recaps, I think it would be useful, as there are some new faces, if we could go around the main table and introduce ourselves again for the benefit of anyone new here today. So I've introduced myself. We'll start with the appellant's team.
Good morning. Works. There we are. Good morning. My name's Charlie Banner, KC, and I'm the barrister for the appellant.
David Seaton from PCL Planning, planning witness for the appellant.
Good morning, Andrew Kitchener from Kitchener Land and Planning.
Good morning, Richard Ground, KC, barrister for the council.
Stephen Stroud, planning witness for the council.
James Bird from Mace Green, cost consultant.
Nick Walker, development surveyor at Savills.
Morning, Selina Cahoon, I'm the barrister for TCDS.
Thank you. So in terms of a further recap, in terms of what we've heard so far, back in December, for those that weren't present, I heard the opening statements from the main parties. I had comments from interested parties and attendants on both days 1 and 2. We heard the presentation of evidence from Ms. Northrop and Mr. Kirby, and cross-examination of them both as well on behalf of the Rule 6 party. We also heard evidence from Mr. Seaton on behalf of the appellant and cross-examination of him as well. We held early roundtable discussion on the planning conditions and planning obligation on a without prejudice basis, but have reserved the right to do so again, as I'll come to in a moment. We also discussed the issue of vacant buildings credit as part of that Section 106 roundtable discussion. And the inquiry has been adjourned since then. We've received proofs and rebuttal evidence on the issue of viability from the appellant and rebuttals from Totnes Community Development Society as the Rule 6 party on that particular issue. We have also received the signed Section 106 and unilateral undertaking in connection with the proposal as well. All of those documents are available on the Enquiry website. So the provisional timetable for today and tomorrow include us hearing evidence from Mr. Bird and Mr. Walker, followed by Mr. Kitchener tomorrow perhaps, and then followed by Mr. Seaton. As I have indicated, I've also left an item available in the agenda for another roundtable session to mop up any issues on planning conditions and the obligation, if we should need to do so. And I will obviously need to take an opportunity to visit the site after the inquiry closes, but so that I've seen the site itself and some of the buildings that we're going to be discussing. What I want to do now then, as you'll see there's an item to discuss costs, is ask the parties that have indicated they wish to make a cost application where we got to with the submission of the written versions.
So, Madam, hopefully you would have received my written costs application on behalf of TCDS in relation to Appeal A yesterday. And I hope...
It's been received whilst I was travelling, so I haven't had a chance to process it yet. I think where we'd agreed, subject to your position, Madam, is that my response to that would be incorporated in the same document as my application. It'll be ready by the end of today. It wasn't able to be produced yesterday, unfortunately, but it'll be ready by the end of today.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam. What I'll try to do, again, if I've got it this evening, is produce a written response to that as well.
Yes.
If it's short and annotated, forgive me.
Fine. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, understood. Thank you. It does sound useful, at least, that there is an endeavour to try and provide all of the written cost applications and responses in writing before the close of the inquiry. Let's continue to try and work towards that if possible. What I am also going to do is ask ID 18, the cost decision that you provided to us yesterday, Mr. Banner, and ask the council and the appellant if that is being accepted without prejudice to their case as an inquiry document.
Yes, Madam, we have no objection to it going in. It may be that Mr. Stroud at the appropriate moment just wants to tell you something about that appeal decision.
I have noted the council's wish to make submissions in respect of those particular items, and I will try and find the appropriate time to do that, if that's okay.
Actually, it may be convenient, but just so you have a full picture about that appeal decision, we also found the council's representations on that appeal, and it might be helpful just to pass you that as well, so that you've got everything to do with that appeal.
What I think I'll need you to do then is to submit them to the appellant and the Rule 6 party first, if that's okay, and then we'll
We're
discuss.
happy. Mr. Seaton was the planner in that appeal too, so I'm sure he's familiar with the council submissions. And,
Okay,
so I've got no issue with that, Madam.
Madam, this is largely the council's issue. We support them, so we have no objection.
Okay then, so can we make a note that on the basis that it's agreed to be accepted, that's ID 19 now, that's the, is it Manor Farm
It is.
Council's submissions? Thank you.
Would you like a paper copy of it now?
Yes, yes please, and could you also send the electronic version on to the support team?
Great.
Madam, can I just raise something when you're ready?
Yes, Ms. King.
So two things. It's a huge favour. I have not, and I probably looked in all the wrong places, been able to access the online document resource that you have referred to. And if somebody could send me the link, I'd be hugely grateful. The other thing, Madam, is that we have a couple of documents to submit that Mr. Walker was going to speak to in his evidence. We've produced them as a document so that Mr. Kitchener can have a look. And I just wondered whether we could submit them now so that over the morning when Mr. Bird is giving evidence, etc., he might be able to look at them.
Okay, can I ask why they are being submitted at this stage?
Well, Madam, they're a response to Mr. Kitchener's rebuttal. And in particular, his suggestion that there should be different sensitivity testing on profit levels.
Okay, Mr. Banner, do you have any views on
well,
the acceptance of these?
I think Mr. Kitchener's rebuttal was submitted quite a few days ago, so I'm a little bit surprised that it's being provided to us now for the first time, and I'm going to be cross-examining this morning, so I won't be able to take instructions on them. So I can't, until I've seen the documents and I'm able to ascertain, are they truly a response to Mr. Kitchener's rebuttal, or are they documents that could have been provided earlier? I'm not in a position to comment on whether they should be accepted.
Okay, so what we might have to do then is to have Mr. Bird's presentation of evidence and cross-examination, re-examination as necessary. The Rule 6 party will have presumably been given the copy of those documents, and we'll have an adjournment, and it will be a case of whether at the resumption we discuss whether the evidence can be accepted and how Mr. Banner's been able to incorporate them into his instructions, okay?
Madam, it's always the way. I'm afraid that we weren't able to discuss Mr. Kitchener's evidence until Monday, so that is why we haven't been able to produce these earlier. But secondly, I'm afraid it is again always the way when it's a rebuttal to a rebuttal. It's far better that you actually have a document to look to and speak to than beforehand. So otherwise we would be just doing this in chief. So it is actually an advantage to the parties that you have something physical.
Difficulty, Madam, is even if they did only discuss on Monday, it's Wednesday now, and it's not a rebuttal to rebuttal, it's a rebuttal to rebuttal to rebuttal to a rebuttal,
well,
I think. So there comes a point where there's a need for finality, and the finality gives the appellant the final word.
Well, whatever, Madam, I will show these to the appellant and we'll find out what they think, and then perhaps I'll just speak to them if they're not submitted.
Okay, thank you. If you pass them over.
Madam will object to this because there are 3 new development appraisals. I mean, this is complete new evidence. So I can tell you that in a nanosecond that we will object to this. They're new development appraisals. There's absolutely no way we can fairly deal with this
I
today.
understand where you're coming from at this point in time. Can I ask you to make a comprehensive submission then before Mr. Walker's evidence? Thank you. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to put to the main parties was, though I'm not going to ask you, well, I'm not going to tell you what to write in your closings, but I want to ask you to consider, if you would, redefine the main issues that this inquiry will sort to over the next couple of days, explore. Obviously, the main issues as we defined them in the original CMC evolved somewhat, and it would be useful to have the parties' perspective on what we've been doing during the course of this inquiry at the close. And I think then that draws a line under most of the sort of opening remarks that I want to make. Are there any procedural questions before we get going?
Madam, sorry, another bit of housekeeping. I'm very grateful. I received the signed at section 106, and I'm sorry I didn't respond, but I didn't think I was obliged to, but thank you very much. Is there a final version of the conditions, madam, that you've received? If it's on that magic link that I've not seen, then so be it, but I haven't seen a final list of conditions.
As I recall, actually, and I would have come to this at the condition session, but there isn't a final list as far as I'm aware. I did receive the appellant's suggestions as to the revisions to conditions 5, 7 and 34. Did anybody else provide any comments on them?
I think that had been through a process where Mr. Seaton had liaised with the council's ecologist, and I think that had been finalised through that process.
But one of the conditions relates to the Brunel building and I think sits entirely separate from an ecology related matter. But it would be useful if the council could revisit that before we get to the roundtable discussion again, because otherwise it will come as a surprise perhaps. I think otherwise the condition session left me with, obviously on a without prejudice basis, lots of things to consider about the need for consistency and or whether there was some element of duplication across the conditions. So I don't think that there is an agreed last version. But there certainly is the versions of those that were included within the Statement of Common Grounds and then the suggestions on 5, 7 and 34 in a separate document on the same website.
That's good. Thank you very much, madam. And just to confirm, I have received a copy of the proposed ecological condition, and so I have seen that. That's why I just wondered if there was a final, but I now thank you very much. I understand.
Okay, thank you. So, the item that I want to go to now is interested party submissions. This is obviously an opportunity for anyone that hasn't already spoken to the inquiry to have their opportunity to do so. I had been made aware of a request from Ms. Edwards to speak to the inquiry today. Is Ms. Edwards here? Okay. Is there anybody that wants to make any formal address to the inquiry that hasn't already done so? I can see. Can you just put your hands up a little higher, please? Sorry. Okay, 2 people. All right. Can you decide which one of you is going to go first and approach? So this is our witness table. So if you could come up and be ready to use the microphone, if that's okay. Either of these works, so you choose whichever suits you best. And can I please take your name?
So MUSA.
Okay, and can I ask about your relationship to the proposal or to the town, or how would you like to be described, as a local resident or interested? Okay, thank you. Okay, in your own time.
Hi, my name's Musa Garba. I live very close to the site. Lived in.
Could you get a little closer to you, just in a straight line?
I live very close to the site and pass it regularly. Also, I've lived in Totnes for about 16 years now, and it's been derelict all that time.
You'd like to put it ever so close, just basically underneath you, if that's okay.
So I've lived in Totnes for about 16 years and passed the site very regularly, and it's been derelict all the time that lived in Totnes. So quite an eyesore, really. But I suppose the crux for me is the fact that it was there was heavy public consultation and heavy local interest in the project, and so that went on for a number of years. However, there hasn't been, I think, since it was sold off, there's been no engagement with the local community at all. which I think is a real shame and a disappointment, really. The fact that they know, whoever bought it must have known the level of interest that it had generated, and there's been no type of engagement at all. They haven't tried to collaborate, they haven't tried any to consult, they haven't held any charrettes or anything like that to try and gauge local opinion about what should go there or anything like that. And we're presented with a fait accompli as to, okay, we'll put in a bit of community, this, that and the other, which to me is not satisfactory. You have a local plan. What's the point in a local plan if the local people are not involved? It seems pointless. So that's my main sort of issue with the whole thing. They need to engage and collaborate with the local community to get something that the local community have some buy-in with and are engaged with, and and that involves them essentially. The other issues are the site is a mess. I don't know how much maintenance goes on there, whether they look after it, whether they make sure that it's safe. I mean, you tried to go on a site visit, which to me was odd that they tried to take you on site and they couldn't. They didn't have PPE, they didn't know the condition of the site or anything like that. So there is a complete disconnect there. The Brunel building, when I saw I'm an architect by trade, and when I saw the planning application for that, I couldn't see what they were trying to do. With a grade 2 listed building, there was nothing there, no detail as to what they were going to do to the building, which to me, for a full planning application, is not adequate. I wouldn't, in my experience, that's not something that I've ever come across, really. So I find it quite unprofessional in a lot of aspects. And that's me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garber.
I don't think Mr. Banner had any questions.
No, I don't. Just here questions for him, but I'm unlikely to for anybody else.
He's not here.
First, can I please ask your name?
Ben Yeager, Y-E-G-E-R.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Okay, please use the microphone when you're ready.
So hi everyone. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share some words regarding the situation we find ourselves in relationship to the Atmos site. And I am going to refer to it as the Atmos site because that is what it is. And to have the opportunity to express our desire as a community to bring the site back into our own joint ownership so that we can realise the vision that we voted for. My name is Ben Yeager. I'm a local resident. I'm a therapist, a coach, a mediator. I work with conflict on a local, national and international level. So I have a lot of experience with people. I want to say, like many others have, how important the Atmos site is to all of us in this community. Atmos is an opportunity for an unprecedented community-owned development that could set a national and international example for the future to be realised in our lifetime. How exciting would that be? So, for me, a central question arose when we sat here back before Christmas, and that is why? Why are we here at all? Why are we still, after 4 years of nothing, still debating Fast Globe's joke of a scheme? Still grappling with the small print of what they will or will not develop, and still listening to the lies that they are peddling about community consultation, providing for the community needs, and caring about anything that anyone really says. Why are we not, instead, in advanced stages of realizing the well-argued, already approved, consulted upon Atmos Totnes scheme that we voted for in unprecedented whole town referendum that will be developed by our trusted TCDS, our own community developers? Why are we wasting public funding on this inquiry? The answer to these interrelated questions is simple, and I really hate to get personal about it, but I'm left with no choice. It is that man over there, Patrick Gillies, so-called land agent, though his office in Plymouth is a boarded-up derelict shack with no letterbox. I want to share how I've come to this conclusion. So just after the Atmos for Totnes campaign started and brought our attention to the fact that the Atmos site had been sold under our noses, I initiated and mediated a meeting between Patrick, his wife, my partner Ruth Bentovim from the campaign, and Rob Hopkins and Francis Northrop from Totnes Community Development Society. This meeting had one central aim: to hear how and why Patrick Gillies aggressively, covertly, and selfishly decided to, at the very last hour, gazump the then named Totnes Community Development Society, and thus robbing the local community of its voted for dream of an innovative community-owned building scheme, which, by the way, Patrick and his wife voted for. I simply could not believe that someone who was moved to live in this small community, who was regularly seen buying pints for folk in the brewery pub, could be so callous and selfish. Sorry, lost myself a second. I thought that perhaps he had somehow made a massive mistake, which I could help him find a way out of and encourage him to do the right thing, back down, see sense, and sell the site back to the community. Now, I've worked therapeutically, and as a facilitator with many, many people, I have the belief that self-awareness and change can come about. But in this case, I was so wrong. And by the way, Patrick, there's still time. And I like the fact that you're on your phone ignoring me. Patrick sat across the table from me in that moment and blankly said that he thought that he knew best what the community and the site needed, that he had voted for the Atmos scheme, thought it was brilliant, but admitted that he hadn't quite worked out how the finances about how community-led and community-owned development works, so had come to the conclusion that it was not viable. And that, again, I lost my place, conclusion it wasn't viable, and that he would do a better job. He also told us that he had lost £38,000 when McCarthy and Stone withdrew from the arrangement and wanted to get some money back. Well, after 4 years of nothing and 2 planning refusals, we know that this so-called viable and deliverable scheme of his simply never has and never will exist. It's outrageous how he has been using the word unviable to try to discredit the Atmos scheme for the last 4 years. And in that time, he never bothered on a highly complex site to do any viability himself. How ridiculous, and shows how shoddy and what a cowboy Patrick really is. Now, the campaign asked what happened because we couldn't believe it. Patrick didn't tell us in that meeting, of course, but we subsequently found out that Patrick probably persuaded his brother-in-law, who happened to be Saputo's chief executive, to broker a behind-the-scenes, closed-doors agreement, which led to the aforementioned gazumping. I mean, that is just shocking. Now, it's obvious to anyone that Patrick and his faceless friends and banking mates, Fast Globe, all from Essex, don't have the skill or know how to develop this site into anything like what we voted for. They have never developed anything like this in their lives. It's an arrogant man's pipe dream to think that
Mr.
they
Yeager, can I ask you to refrain from using quite so many adjectives to refer to Patrick? Can we take the tone down a little bit, please?
Okay. It is what one feels in the community, man. It's what's felt.
Can I have the essence of the feeling then, rather than the sort of quite direct adjectives that you're using?
Sure. Okay. So between them, the Essex gang either have no ability or no intention to develop the site at all. Everybody knows that this site can't realistically be developed commercially. This is just blind greed founded on nothing real. I mean, how can someone sit there and live with themselves knowing that there is a housing crisis in the town and arguing that they shouldn't have to include affordable housing in their scheme up front? Now, on some level, I really get Fast Globe. They don't live here. They are purely capitalist for profit outfit. That's what they do, try and make money by land banking, etc. But Patrick Gillies, he lives here. His children go to school here. He tries to be chummy with members of our community who he has directly robbed of his amazing opportunity. He tries to do that with me. So he is unashamedly dragging us through this unnecessary appeal for his own greed. This is wasted time. On Saturday, the Atmos for Totnes campaign held a heartfelt gathering at the site. They have done this before. It was called the 4th anniversary of nothing. 1,448 wasted days. At least 100 people came and tied 1,448 small tags to the gates, each representing a wasted day. That's a lot of time. They and all the posters around town advertising the anniversary were taken down. But it's not possible to erase the feeling of this town, and this town will keep on going to the site, keep mourning the lost days until they turn into productive days. I invite you, the examiner, to see through all the fancy words, see that these shoddy plans are not viable or deliverable, and uphold the refusal. Then Southampton get on with issuing a community purchase order and ultimately bringing the Atmos site into community ownership to pave the way for getting on with realising the extraordinary, viable scheme this town deserves. The sooner, the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yeager. Before you go anywhere, can I just check with Mr. Banner as to whether he has any questions for you?
I don't, madam, but I'm going to have to explain why. There's an awful lot of what was said there that, as you can imagine, we don't agree with. It's our view that you don't need to resolve that agreement to make the planning judgments you need to in this case. But I'd like to be very clear. We reject that analysis, and for the benefit of future speakers, it may be worth the inquiry being reminded that the laws of defamation do apply to these proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. You can take your seat again. Okay, so just so I don't miss anybody, was there anyone else that wanted to come and speak to the inquiry that hasn't already done so? Okay, thank you. On the basis that we're moving on to item number 3, I am going to ask Mr. Bird to be ready to present your evidence. Is everybody else ready to move on, or is it felt that we need a short adjournment before we do so?
I'm happy to crack on.
Okay. All right, please come forward.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Bird, I've noticed that you've got a slim volume of evidence. We had a quick exchange. You might want to refer to Mr. Kitchener's evidence or have it before you, just in case you're asked questions by Mr. Banner, which I suspect may be true. So have those documents with you. If it's all online, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Bird. So what we have from you is, in effect, your proof of evidence. I say in effect because previously, of course, we had your analysis appended to Mr. Walker's financial viability assessment. But essentially, because that's attached to there, we'll just deal with your proof of evidence and a rebuttal that you have done as well to Mr. Kitchener. So if I can take you to your proof of evidence of the 13th of November, I'll just introduce you to the inquiry. So it's page 3, madam. Sorry. So you are James Bird, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're Director of Cost Consultancy, Mace Green Consulting, and you described Mace Green Consulting as a project management, cost consulting, building surveying and development consultancy practice providing full UK coverage.
That's correct, yes.
Paragraph 1.2, you refer to the reasons for your proof being submitted and in relation to these appeals, and obviously we're dealing with only one now. And that your evidence should be read together with Mr. Walker's, which appends the 2 viability assessments. And then 1.4, you describe yourself and the consultancy team at Mace Green, which you say has a wide range of experience in mixed-use residential, industrial, commercial, health and community trust projects throughout the UK. And then you refer to your previous experience from Mace Green. You were director at Leeds, UK.
That's right, that's correct, yeah.
At 1.5, you refer to the site itself, and I don't suggest you refer to that specifically because we can all read it. But I think what we would like to hear from you, Mr. Bird, is your involvement with TCDS and the site and when that began.
That's right. Well, Mace Green got involved in 2019 to help with the planning committees and taking through some of the planning conditions through that. That was my colleague, Rob Chudley, who's with us today. He went through and got a deep understanding of the constraints of the site, the difficult nature of a brownfield complex refurbishment and development, along with the lines of all the other abnormals which go along with the site.
And there is reference to a firm called Mace in the JLL report. Just for clarity, who are they and who are they compared with Mace Green?
The completely separate entities, just share the same part of the name.
In terms of the background, and you confirmed your involvement with TCDS at 1.10, your background section begins at section 2 on page 4. The 2.8 in particular, you have listed a series of due diligence reports that relate to the promotion of the CRTBO. Obviously, as you said, you weren't involved at that stage, but you've referred to those reports and they're all listed, including structural and foul drainage and the preliminary geotech, as well as other matters. And then you say at 2.9 that those documents are all publicly accessible and can be submitted subject to the appellant's request should they want it. Have you had any discussion about those reports with the appellant or anything like that?
Not at all. We offer to have discussions and to progress our evidence, but that wasn't taken up.
Okay. And you then refer to Mr. Kirby's outline design proposals, which in effect converted the outline scheme into a series of proposals, as it were. And you say at 2.11 that indeed certain assumptions had to be made because this is an outline scheme.
Absolutely, yeah.
You will understand the appellant's position from Mr. Kitchener that the fact that this is an illustrative outline scheme should dissuade you, in effect, from being able to carry out the cost analysis that you do. Can you just deal with that point and in terms of what you understand this site requires, and indeed the constraints and what that means in respect of any development that takes place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the reports which you refer back to would be applicable to whatever development goes onto this site. So addressing the flood zone 3 implications, the demolition, the site clearance, the ground contamination, the geotechnical solutions because of the ground conditions, which are all known about and known abnormalities. And because of the level of detail which was completed previously in 2015 and 2016, we can take the extensive reports and work taken on those lines to inform cost allowances for any particular scheme going forward. So forming the flood storage within the northern site will always be there. Putting in the leads, the throttle works, the swales, the environmental implications, the batch roost and the like would be all required whatever development goes on that site.
You deal with the site issues at section 3 of your evidence, and clearly you refer to the sorts of works that you say would be required. You've listed the flood alleviation measures and drainage, that's page 8. You then describe the leat and throttle structure, the Brunel building works, and the new build design proposals, which you've looked at, as well as protected species. I'm looking at page 13 now, the geo-environmental issues, both north and south, and the ground investigations, asbestos at page 14, network rail issues, utility issues, etc. So just help us with this, Mr. Bird. Is there anything that you have understood about the nature of the appeal proposal, Appeal B, that would indicate that some of those, I know we can deal with the bridge in a moment, yeah, but that those works will not be required? Is there anything about this appeal site that suggests that those would not be required?
No, not at all. We factored in is to raise the levels of the northern site to perform a plateau. We've taken due consideration from previous schemes to this particular scheme, where it's been a smaller area of plateau, so we reflected that in our quantum, where we applied rates to for coming up with the cost for forming those.
And whilst you didn't carry out the work that Mr. Kirby did, clearly, what do you understand about the constraints upon the site and what the effect of that is upon where you put your development and the extent thereof?
Well, we took the Andrew Kirby scheme and obviously the tenure mix he put forward for that, and obviously compared that against over the overlay of the site plan and derived our costs from looking at that particular scheme and the areas which are informed from it.
But in terms of where the development can go,
yeah,
how is that affected by the works that you say are required?
Well, there's certainly in the northern area of the site that you've got the flood storage area, so obviously to mitigate the potential for Totnes town flooding, part of the town plan on that basis. So no development works would be able to go onto that particular site unless you were looking to, on another location outside of this particular site, find alternative flood storage space.
What do you understand, and if you can't answer, that's fine, but what do you understand about that in terms of numbers of houses or units or the type of commercial development that might be proposed there instead?
Well, it'll all come down to the geotechnical lay of the land. Obviously, if you And obviously the town plan, which would put obviously the requirements of what they would like to see as being delivered.
Thank you. Then, in terms of Mr. Kitchener's evidence, let's look firstly at his proof.
Mm-hmm.
The principal issue that he raises is firstly that about the illustrative nature of this scheme, and I've asked you questions about how those would be affected by the matters that you've raised. The other point that he makes is that he's been informed that both the bridge works, and forgive me, it's in your rebuttal, so it's probably easy just as well to look at it there. But you've been that the bridge works. This is paragraph 511 of Mr. Kitchener's that you're responding to, and it's page 2 of your rebuttal.
Mm-hmm.
That there should be that the bridge works are not proposed, which were one of the elements that you have included in the costings. Tell us about your understanding about that, if the bridge was not included, and what that would do.
The bridge was deemed to be required to be replaced from the previous 2016 scheme. So we've taken that the condition surveys of that as being a requirement to the scheme. If the bridge works wasn't going to be replaced, there would still be quite an extensive amount of alterations to the bridge to be able to bring it up to the required levels. If you're raising the plateau of the northern side, so there will be some costs included within that at the time. Within the allowances we put in there, we included for a temporary bridge to obviously maintain the development programme. Whilst the new bridge or alterations to those works were completed.
And the other point that Mr. Kitchener raises is, as is being told, that the appellant won't seek adoption of the internal road network. And again, he says this is going to be a considerable cost saving. Can you deal with that point, please?
I would challenge whether it would be a considerable cost saving for downgrading the specifications. You would still have HGVs, delivery lorries, refuse trucks still coming onto the site, and therefore it would need to be of a certain standard of specification to be able to take those vehicles on board. If the local authority weren't taking it as adopting that as a highway and maintaining it, there would then have to be a responsibility on the people who own the site or using the site to maintain that road for the future going forward. That would involve some form or function of management fee or the like, and that would probably therefore need to be considered also then within the actual scheme's overall viability, as it would be an additional cost.
We also know that Mr. Kitchener hasn't included the listed building costs and in either way in terms of any repairs and remediation and works of conversion. What is your view about that? Simply excluding it from the costings.
If it's excluding it from the costings, then those buildings won't be brought back into use. You know, we've looked at the schemes which have been relatively quite detailed in comparison to some of the other ones. We produced a detailed elemental cost plan based on what we could see at the time, and used benchmark information and the experience from our team of heritage experts to determine a likely refurbishment cost to bring those back into use.
Paragraph 11 of your rebuttal, Mr. Bird.
Mm-hmm.
That's page 3, madam. You refer to paragraph 5.29 of Mr. Kitchener's evidence. And if I could just read 5.29 out, it says, I've made inquiries with my clients, Fast Globe, into the expected abnormal costs associated with clearing the site and have been provided with a letter and attachments which are reproduced. This includes a demolition and site clearance quote from an independent contractor amounting to 812,500 and a quote for asbestos of 41,000 and an estimate from Fast Globe itself, which is, I suppose, the other part of the appellant, for the provision of a bat house of 75,000. And then it says, my client's investigations into other matters since their acquisition of the site in 2020, such as the condition of the bridge, and we've discussed the bridge, the method of adjusting the levels to provide flood storage, and the intention that on-site roads, again, we've just dealt with that, lead them to advise me that they anticipate no other abnormal costs that should be considered. I can certainly ask Mr. Kitchen himself, but he seems to be suggesting that there are no other abnormal costs, or his client suggesting no other abnormal costs than those points made. What is your view about that as a position from the appellant?
I would disagree with that. I think going from the previous schemes from the 2016, the Environment Agency was heavily involved with and commissioned Black and Veatch to assess the most optimal scheme to address the floodplain and also integrate that within the Totnes flood mitigation plan, which is why the implications of the leat, producing the throttle for it, the swales, and raising the plateau, which is also part of one of the outline conditions, highlights that these works will be required. So not to be discounted.
And just again, so we're clear, is there any evidence that these works have already started, or that there's
not that I'm aware of, no.
If we turn to the end of your rebuttal, so where you're looking at Mr. Kitchener's evidence, I think the easiest thing, madam, if it's acceptable, is for Mr. Berger just to read through those passages as they draw the points together, and I would, if that's acceptable. So, Mr. Berg, could you read your paragraphs 12 to 15 of your rebuttal?
Mr. Kitchener acknowledges the difficulty in estimating the costs of site clearance and remediation, particularly for a complex brownfield site such as the former Dairy Crest site. There is an extensive amount of due diligence work undertaken by TCDS team, and which is available to the appellant, let alone any other developer, and which has been considered and relied on by the appellant. It is not clear why Mr. Kitchener has not made cost allowances for the following key site abnormals, which will be part of any redevelopment of the site. Flood alleviation measures by raising of the site levels and the Zone 3 flood risk, together with the creation of swales to address stormwater attenuation requirements as required by the Environment Agency. Decontamination of existing soils, lead and hydrocarbons, particularly given the content of the JGP report dated January 2016, which showed numerous instances of elevated levels of polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which could indicate a currently unidentified source of contamination on site within the footprint of the existing buildings. In such circumstances, an allowance would be expected to be made for contaminated spoil removal, along with an allowance for the removal of the buried petroleum tanks. Geotechnical works to the existing soils to provide suitable foundations for new build purposes. The JGP report dated September 2015, conducted in respect of the CRTBO scheme, focused primarily on the north site, as this part of the overall site contains the poorest classification of soils. The JGP report indicates that both piled and deep trench foundations are recommended across the site. It was recommended that consideration be given to an appropriate mix of foundation solutions. Remedial works to the existing leat and provision of a leat throttle, including temporary retaining structures to prevent soil and contaminated water risk to the existing leat. Working alongside network rail apparatus is a site abnormal requiring detailed method statements, risk assessments and logistics plans for vehicular access beside the railway, protection measures during refurbishment of the Brunel building and construction of all external works adjacent to the main line railway. Existing public, live and historic utilities that require diversion and renewal, e.g. the foul drainage main located south of the leat, which may require diversion to facilitate the development proposals. Wales and West Utilities record drawings show that there is an existing 125mm diameter MDPE medium pressure gas main running through the site. This main may require diversion to account for the new build design proposals, including repositioning of the existing gas governor. Western Power, now National Grid, record drawings indicate 11 kV mains and a substation positioned to the southeast end of the north site. The appeal scheme proposals, as with the CRTBO proposals, will necessitate the diversion of the electric mains and repositioning the existing substation. Within paragraph 5.14 of Mr. Kitchen's proof of evidence, there is a reference to estimating the clean or greenfield equivalent of the land in question and then deducting the expected costs of clearing the site to arrive at an estimated land value. In order to achieve anything like a clean site, the above works and costs therefore cannot simply be ignored. Mr. Kitchener suggests that a robust analysis is provided through his comparable valuation in paragraph 15, but I fail to see how it can be a robust when the cost analysis made by Mr. Kitchener do not include the known and significant site abnormals referred to above. Mr. Kitchener confirms in paragraph 5.17 that he's made allowance for any significant, significant abnormals arising out of the cited residential sites he seeks to rely upon as comparables. It is not clear to which sites he has made this allowance and how. He recognised that most sites have at least some abnormal costs, but given that all of the comparable sites are greenfield in nature and in no way compared to the brownfield nature of the former Dairy Crest site, again it is questioned how he has factored this in. This is a set of circumstances where there is a clear and well-documented independent assessment of the site and identification of the site abnormals, as well as the complex brownfield nature of the site. It is not clear why a prudent developer would not recognise these important factors and make an appropriate contingency allowance within their financial appraisal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. Those are all my questions. Mr. Banner may have some for you.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Bird, could we go to the very final page of your proof and appendices? I've got the online version. It's page 50, where you set out your CV.
Yes.
Appendix C. Just wait till the inspector's got that too.
Page 50 of his.
Oh, it's 50 of the PDF of the proof of the proof and appendices. It's a single PDF.
Oh yes. Sorry, my pages aren't numbered.
Which, by the way, we didn't actually receive the proof. It went online, but it doesn't matter because we've received the report, but it never actually reached us. But there we are. Mr. Bird, you set out your experience here. You've been doing this job for give or take 20 years by the look of it.
30 years in the industry.
30 years.
30 years in the industry. I've been working.
Very
20
impressive.
Years chartered.
Don't look old enough. But there we are. And I mean, you're a leader in your profession. You tell us you joined Mace Green in 2019. You're the national head of cost consultancy on the management board. And Mace Green itself is one of the leading companies in your field. That's right, isn't it?
We're in the building top 100 consultants, so yeah.
Yeah, so captain of your sector. And so just help us with this in the light of your very considerable experience and standing. You're aware that this is an allocated site in the development plan, yes? And I assume you're aware, are you, that it's agreed between the council and the appellant that subject to conditions 106, the scheme is in accordance with the development plan. Yes, you aware of that? And are you aware that the your clients last time we were here made clear in their evidence that they didn't challenge that finding? Yes. So help us with in your very considerable experience, have you ever been called upon to give evidence on costs in the level of granularity that you do at a planning appeal where everybody agrees that the scheme is in accordance with the development plan? Have you ever been in this situation before?
This is the first time I've been called as witness.
Yeah. It's a strange situation, don't you agree? Has anybody in your team, so you've got a very strong in-depth team, are you aware of anyone in your team having ever been in this situation?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Are you aware of anyone in your profession having been in this situation?
Wouldn't be able to answer yes or no against that.
Right. So you're not aware? No. Have you seen an appeal decision anywhere where there's been a similar scenario where a planning inspector has had to grapple with granular costs evidence in relation to an allocated site which is agreed to be in accordance with the development plan? Can you help us?
Not in my experience, but I'm not saying that that hasn't happened.
But as far as you're aware, we're in uncharted territory here.
Possibly, but it's not something which I am aware of, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened elsewhere.
Okay. Could you now then, we can put that document aside and go to Mr. Kitchener's first proof, paragraph 2.4.
Seems to have lost it on my screen.
It's page 5 of the hard copy, which almost certainly means it won't be page 5 of the PDF.
Well, just give me 1 second. Seems to have closed it and lost it. If you want to ask me the question,
I don't think it's going to be controversial. So, what Mr. Kitchener notes is that apart from access and the change of use element, layout, scale, appearance, and landscaping are reserved matters for future consideration, which means that the house types, sizes, accommodation mix, spec, etc., residence units, and the exact nature of the commercial space are still to be resolved and will be influenced in due course by, amongst other matters, the state of the market. It's entirely correct, isn't it?
Seems reasonable. We've priced it on that basis as well.
Yes. So, I mean, you make various points about the extent to which certain costs can be predicted in terms of abnormals. But in terms of the nature of the development itself, there is a degree of uncertainty in the way that he described, isn't there?
Well, I disagree with that. We've referred to BCIS benchmark data for the different types of tenure, which I'm sure you're aware of, is a basket of previous schemes, and therefore is based on the benchmark norm of what's been delivered for those types of developments, and we've applied those to this particular one. There is a potential problem with doing that is obviously because it's very historical in nature, because they are benchmark schemes. We have had quite a significant change in building regulations and specification requirements, whereby looking back at previous schemes, they will be low.
But those comparables that you refer to are all fixed developments, whereas the final form of this development is within the parameters of any outline permission granted. It is uncertain. That's right, isn't it? As a matter of fact. Can you answer your question? As a matter of fact, that's right, isn't it?
Yes, but the viability as a whole, with working with Mr. Walker, we've used the same assumptions based on the appellant scheme.
Well, if you look, for example, at your report, because think before the proof, there was a report dated the 4th of October, appended to Mr. Walker's report, and the report, again, hard copy, page 6. There's an estimate. There's a section 3 assumptions and basis of estimate schedule.
Yes.
And that says, for example, at number 8, second line, we've had to make broad assumptions in regards to various matters.
Yes.
That's the position, isn't it? You've had to make assumptions, and some of those assumptions are quite broad. Factually correct.
They're factually correct, but if you're talking about tenure of or type of house developments, and you know, there are benchmark industry norms of expected levels of specification, MEP requirements to deliver those, and the like. So whilst yes, they are broad, and with what we're talking about is probably whether you have a porch on the front or not. You know, I would not say that anything which we have priced is out of akin.
But assumptions of what, though? Because the final nature of the development, again, within the four corners of the outline permission, the final nature will be subject to reserve matters approval.
Of course it will be, but to be able to, at this early stage, to be able to look into and say we're having apartment blocks, we're a retail commercial space, you know, houses of any number of bedrooms and the like. There is benchmark norms out there of expected costs which you would be targeting to deliver to, as you would do in any other development appraisal situation. You know, on top of that, then we are looking at the specific site abnormals, which, you know, we've talked about already.
It would be fair for the inspector to proceed on the basis that the exercise that you undertake is a predicative exercise, which includes assumptions, some of which are broad, and as a result, some uncertainties. All of that is correct, isn't it? Can you answer the question yes or no, and then give your qualification? All that is correct.
Yes, but yes, but it's what it's reflective of is a number of schemes. You know, schemes which we've been involved with, and schemes elsewhere within the industry where you get the broad specification of what would be the most likely delivery solution for those units.
I mean, if a developer, assuming you hadn't been instructed by your clients, if my clients came to you now asking at this stage, pre-planning outline application for a detailed costing, which could be contractual, binding, suggest you wouldn't be in a position to provide that at this stage, would you?
Contractually binding, as into a builder to develop it out, or
well, would you state your would you put your money where your mouth is?
No, but you know, but this is my profession, which we do. You know, you take on, you need to consider which is known information and or most likely information which you will encounter. I think there's been significant level of detail, probably up to RABA stage 4 on the previous schemes, and therefore which we can rely on to be able to inform our costing and our advice.
I mean, this is no criticism, but as far as I understand it, you've not got yourself professional qualifications or expertise in the following disciplines: planning, civil engineering, flood risk, highway engineering, as far as that's different from civil engineering, I'm not sure it is, or ecology. You don't have professional experience or qualifications in those fields.
I don't have professional qualifications in those lines, but that is where we rely on the reports of people who are qualified to inform us of the implications and tell us what the quantum and the likely implications or technical solutions would be required to overcome those difficulties. We then take that and then in our professional expertise and qualifications, price that.
Of course. But insofar as you make assumptions as to planning requirements, engineering requirements, highway requirements, you rely upon others. You don't exercise your own. You're not here to respect to giving your own expert evidence on those matters.
No, we We might, in early situations, detail where we experiences and solutions we've had on other comparable sites, brownfield developments, where you likely might come up with frustrations or abnormals, but the actual detailing out a technical solution is not something which is under my guise.
And just to illustrate that, because I'm not going to, you'll be pleased to know, I hope the inspector is, I'm not going to go through every single line in the cost schedule, but if take your rebuttal, page 2, the first page of text. Yep. I mean, take for example the internal road network, and the point about, well, might there be some savings associated with it not being adopted? You accept in the second sentence this may be a saving on its face. However, the design of the internal road will still need to be a standard suitable for trade and potentially HGVs, etc. You're not in a position to help the inspector, are you, on what is that standard suitable for HGVs? That's outside your expertise, isn't it?
The detailed specification of to be actually design that would be, but from experiences on other sites where we haven't had adoptable roads and we've looked at numerous value engineering examples, I think you would be talking in the savings of the tens of thousands rather than the hundreds of thousands. And then obviously going back onto what I mentioned earlier on about who would be managing and maintaining that road if it was not adoptable.
Well, the extent of the saving is subject to a number of dependables, aren't there? You've given some example that would depend on the site, the circumstances of the site, depends upon management, etc. There are a number of things that can influence the saving. There's no evidence before the inquiry about those variables, is there?
No.
Thank you.
However, you know, with the debate about it, we're not talking about whether there requires to be a site road or not to be a site road. And so, therefore, we're talking about the depth of the substrate is the variable between that.
And I mean, again, in the second to last illustration, the bridge, is the bridge capable of reuse? And if it is capable of reuse, what engineering features, if I can call it that, are necessary to deliver that? Again, those are matters that are matters of engineering outside your expertise.
Absolutely, we relied on the previous 2016 scheme, who went through in a lot more detail and determined that the bridge would need to be replaced, along with a temporary bridge for the duration of the construction period.
Two last points, and I think we've probably finished. You talked in your sheet. You used the word allowances. In relation to cost allowances. I want to explore that word. My own personal experience of costs is any project takes twice as long and costs twice as much, at least for domestic projects. But have you gone for outer limits? I mean, allowance suggests that there's you wouldn't expect the cost to be more.
Are you on a specific? Are you talking about a specific? Or are we talking about?
Well, it's just your use of the word allowances. We don't think we see in the written material. I just want to explore because there's two. Just hear me out. I mean, there's two ways of looking at costings. One is it's a prediction, and the likelihood is you land on the nose, you hit the bullseye, or are you making a sort of outer parameter, an allowance? And that
right. No. So for the
more. What actually are you saying?
No, we've quantified the requirements. So if it's the external works, we've actually taken based on the appellant's design. We actually measured those up and broken those down elementally, rather than just a broad brush cost per square metre of a likely cost. So we've actually looked into those. Ditto for the mentioned for the heritage works. You know, because of the scheme, we actually went into an elemental detailed estimate the best we could with the information we received and used our knowledge and experience to ascertain the likelihood of what those rates would be.
So it's a prediction rather than something other than a prediction.
It's an estimate at this stage, isn't it? It's the nature.
The likelihood of the cost being exactly in relation to every single entry, exactly the same as the numbers you give. I suspect quite low. I mean, if they're all identical, you should be buying a lottery ticket. Isn't that fair?
Well, as you would have seen in there, because of the early nature of the stage where we are in the project, we included a 5% price and design contingency. That's not a client contingency for variations and moving, but that is to address or to have the consideration that.
Yes, a client contingency could be different.
A client contingency would be cover any specific risk which they take on board, or change management for requirements as that might change over a period of a development.
Because the relationship you have to your clients here is different than if you were doing this exercise for the developer. If you're doing it for the developer, you owe them a duty of care, and you have insurance issues, etc. So it's a different exercise, isn't it, in that respect?
We've addressed this as we would be working for a developer, as we do in our normal day-to-day running of our business.
And lastly, timing. These are cost estimates on the assumption that development was happening today, is it?
Yeah, they were base dated third quarter 23.
Yes. Now, obviously, there's the issue of inflation generally, but obviously in the construction industry, there are particular things that have raced ahead of inflation in recent years. Oak, wood got very expensive, didn't it, at one point, and short in supply. Yes, that's fair, isn't it? So it is possible, isn't it, that in future, obviously inflation will tend to go up, the rate of it may come down, but it's possible that certain things which are particularly expensive or have got particularly more expensive in recent year might become less expensive, like wood, for example. That's fair, isn't it?
Wood, steel, as another example, we when we tend to use inflation indices, we use a construction specific index for the BCI, all-in tender price index, rather than RPI, CPI, a generalised one, which is once again takes into account construction's specific abnormalities.
But you understand my point. I just want to be clear to help the expector. She does need to go to this level of granularity. That it's possible and conceivable that over 3 years, for example, over 5 years, certain costs could actually be less expensive than they are today.
Going back to, as I said, it's...
Go to the answer first of all, and then it is possible, isn't it, yes or no, that certain costs, whether it's wood or steel or other supplies, could become less expensive than they are as of today. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, however, any aspect of inflation can go up or down.
Yes. I was going to ask you one more question. It's completely escaped my mind. Oh yes, you said you've made assumptions about standards, for example, national space standards for the internal.
That was Andrew Kirby.
Because
actually, Andrew Kirby obviously took those standards and we took the areas off the back.
But I mean, of course, it's possible, isn't it, that standards might change? I mean, we hear a lot from all political parties about encouraging brownfield regeneration. It's possible that it could be over the course of a development.
Sorry, would it be okay if we just had some quiet so I can hear? Sorry.
It's possible that over the course of the life of the development, the standards may be liberalised. That's conceivable, isn't it?
It's conceivable it might go down. There's conceivable it might be increased significantly.
But if they were liberalised, that could have an effect on cost.
It will have an effect on cost, but it will also have an effect on the revenue coming back out. So it's if it's a smaller property, it will attract a lesser sale value. It's possible.
Possibly, it's
possible.
Like a lot of this, it's a guess, isn't it? Thank you, Mr. Bird. Pleasure meeting you. Thank you very much indeed. Just stay there because it may be the inspector or your counsel.
I actually don't have any questions for you, but Ms. Cahoon may do.
Just a couple of points in the examination.
Sorry, microphone.
Just a couple of questions in re-examination, Mr. Bird. Thank you, Madam. The last series of
Mr. Banner, can you turn off?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. The last series of questions that you had from Mr. Banner related to prices can go up, prices can go down. How unusual is that a situation for you to deal with? Your microphone.
My apologies. Sorry. Um, Prices fluctuate in the construction industry depending on supply, availability. To name but two reasons. You know, as I referred to with inflation, you know, we're not just using the generalised CPI or RPI. We're looking at inflation which is specific to construction projects, and therefore it's a basket case. Basket of so choose my wording there. A basket of historical ones, and you know, and forecast forward, and you know the implications whether it's oak flooring would be factored down because it's a relatively smaller cost in comparison to, you know, structural steel, which will have a much greater implication on a larger development.
So whenever costings are done, whenever you carry out this sort of exercise, how do you address that as a factor if it's always going to be a factor?
What we factored in, and we base dated it at the price at the time we did the estimate, which was third quarter 2023, and didn't include any inflation forecasting forward from that point going forward. The rates which we use and have used for the abnormal costs are market condition rates. For the benchmark data from the BCIS, once again we're using their own indices to bring them up to whatever base date we choose.
And again, just so we're clear, how unusual an exercise is that?
It's not an unusual exercise.
You were asked about the reason that you're here, and you've carried out this exercise at this stage. And the point was put to you that it's highly unusual for a developer to, where he's got where the developer has a policy compliant scheme, that they should that there should be no suggestion that there's a issue of viability. Have you carried out assessments in respect of outline schemes?
Yes, frequently.
And how do those compare with what you've been presented with this appeal?
With this appeal, we go to the standard of what we've produced in our proof of evidence. It is to propose a scheme and not know what your viability is, and the outturn cost of that seems to be remiss. You're potentially investing tens of millions of pounds into a scheme and not knowing whether you will be able to recoup that money, let alone make a profit off that money, seems inadequate in the due diligence and process of going through it.
And again, just to get your view on this, the nature of the site, how relevant is that to the sort of exercise you've been talking about in the due diligence?
Because it's a brownfield site, a contaminated site, got existing usage on it, that significantly increases the risk of the development, and therefore, you know, it would highlight an added need to do a viability assessment to ensure that what the proposals are being put forward are affordable, in terms of either recouping whatever outlay of money which you're putting in, or to be able to demonstrate a profit back to the developer.
And what do you make of the fact, Mr. Bird, that there has been nothing put forward by the appellant in terms of costings other than what we've seen?
As I mentioned, you know, it seems a lack of due diligence on the development process. Now, that could be either through a naivety of the process of what developers would normally tend to go through, or it might, to me and personal opinion, it might indicate that there is no intention actually to develop out the scheme.
What would happen if application was granted for this outline scheme and then came to reserve matters, and the sorts of issues that you have highlighted arose at that stage?
This question arises out of re-examination. I was a little bit generous of cross-examination. I was generous for the last two, but re-examination should be confined to cross-examination.
Well, Mr. Banner, you raised the fact of this being an unusual situation, and I'm dealing with the unusual situation.
Of a site that's agreed to be in accordance with the development plan. We're straying a long way from examination.
Well, Madam, I entirely disagree. Mr. Banner raised the fact that this is an unusual situation, and I asked Mr. Bird's view about how unusual it is for an outline scheme to be assessed.
The question was framed on the basis of a site which is agreed to be in accordance with the development plan.
But it's an outline scheme, Madam. I fail to see, if Mr. Banner wants to object to this sort of question, that would be extraordinary.
I do.
Well, Madam, is it, you have an outline scheme before you, you can assess it on that basis. Am I not allowed to ask questions about the fact that this is an outline scheme? Is that what Mr. Banner is saying?
In chief, yes. But
that's
but
where
this is
I was going
re-examination.
to. The chief, I didn't hear some of the questioning that you are phrasing now in chief, where it perhaps would have been more appropriate to do so. It may be that you could tailor your in chief to Mr. Walker to ask the same questions because they cover quite a lot of the same. But if you could focus on re-examination, that would be most appreciated.
Well, you've heard what Mr. Bird has said, Madam. I've asked you about the constraints of the site, so I'm not going to go back on that. Let me just double check about any other questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Bird.
Thank you. It seems to me that we have a need for quite a lengthy adjournment. I'd say of at least half an hour before we could consider moving on to Mr. Walker's evidence in chief.
Well, Madam, can I put it this way? It depends upon your decision. Because I've looked at these. They are new development appraisals. If you don't admit them, we won't need a lengthy adjournment. It was suggested that the justification for them being provided was that Mr. Kitchener had said something in his rebuttal about a failure to sensitivity test, etc., trust check. He actually made that point in his proof. And if you get Mr. Kitchener's proof, there is reference within there, and indeed he provides it to the. I've lost the proof now. To the RICS guidance, which is appended. On standing back and checking. For example, 4.8, Savills have not tested their appraisal. It's a point that he makes throughout his evidence, both his proof and the rebuttal. So it is, with respect, entirely fallacious for the Rule 6 party to say that this, I will call it a shorthand. I don't accept it as a sensitivity. I need to take instructions on it, which I haven't. But this so-called sensitivity testing, the need for it could only reasonably have occurred to them upon receipt of Mr. Kitchener's rebuttal. And one of the mandatory, in the PIN's guidance, mandatory cumulative criteria that have to be satisfied in order for late evidence to be admitted is that they couldn't have been provided earlier. This could have been provided earlier. And for that reason alone, it's not admissible. If you rule against me, Madam, we will need to take time to look at it. And I don't know what our response will be. We may even have to put in a written response. We may even have to have a longer adjournment. I simply don't know. There's a very short answer to this, which is it doesn't satisfy they could have been provided earlier criteria. And so therefore you shouldn't admit it, and you can't admit it, actually.
Ms. Cahoon, I obviously haven't seen what you've attempted to submit. Is the summary of what it is, from Mr. Banner's view anyway, is that correct?
So, Mr. Banner is not correct. This was a specific issue that was raised by Mr. Kitchener. He may have generally suggested that sensitivity analysis that was conducted by Mr. Walker was to some extent a simple exercise. But Mr. Kitchener specifically raised in his rebuttal was the fact that no differences between a 20% profit were applied in his analysis. And therefore, that would have been a further sensitivity analysis that should have been carried out. And so that is precisely what an exercise that Mr. Walker has conducted on a 15% profit, 10% and a 0% profit. And the results, we say, are consistent with the assessment that he's done. Madam, I am not going to hold out for these because Mr. Walker is entirely capable of speaking to the sensitivity analysis that he conducted and the robustness thereof. It was an interesting exercise to carry out and revealing, but if Mr. Banner is going to object, then so be it. I won't submit that we need to put it in.
In which case, doesn't sound like you have to make a decision, madam, if it's been withdrawn on that basis. And on that basis, we don't need a long break. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nonetheless, I'm going to suggest a 15-minute adjournment and we'll come back. Is that okay? Thank you.